The Lincoln Center Opera House had never looked more magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors as elegantly dressed patrons swept through the grand foyer in designer gowns and perfectly tailored tuxedos. Tonight was the premiere of Swan Lake with the New York City Ballet. Tickets had been impossible to get for months. I smoothed down my simple black dress, the one I'd bought on clearance 3 years ago, and tried to ignore the way Patricia's eyes swept over me with barely concealed disdain. "Really, Emma?" my stepmother murmured, adjusting her $8,000 Chanel gown. "Couldn't you have made more of an effort? This is a very important evening for your father's business associates." Dad stood beside her in his tuxedo, looking uncomfortable. "Emma looks fine, Patricia." "Fine isn't appropriate for the opera house," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Then, leaning closer, she whispered just loud enough for others to hear, "This theater is too classy for someone like you. You don't belong here." Heat rose in my cheeks, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm sorry my dress isn't up to your standards." Patricia's smile was ice cold. "It's not just the dress, dear. It's about understanding your place. Some people are meant for places like this." She gestured vaguely at herself. "Others should probably stick to community theater." My half-sister Madison giggled behind her champagne flute. At 19 she was Patricia's perfect princess, dressed in a $3,000 cocktail dress that probably cost more than I made in 2 months at the art gallery where I worked. "Mom's right," Madison said breezily. "Emma always looks so out of place at nice events." I adjusted my simple dress quietly and said nothing. What was the point? I'd learned long ago that defending myself only made Patricia more vicious. "The Ashfords are here tonight," Patricia continued, scanning the crowd. "And the Whitmore family. Very important people. Emma, please try not to embarrass us." Dad's business partners had always been her obsession. Ever since she'd married him 10 years ago, she'd been determined to climb the social ladder, using his construction company's success as her ticket into high society. The fact that his daughter from his first marriage didn't fit her image of refined elegance was a constant irritation. "Perhaps Emma could wait in the car," Patricia suggested with false sweetness. "I'd hate for her to feel uncomfortable all evening." "She's staying," Dad said firmly, though I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Of course she is," Patricia replied smoothly, her tone suggesting anything but agreement. "Well, at least try to stay in the background, Emma. And please don't tell anyone you're related to us. I'd rather not have to explain." I nodded silently, used to being treated like an embarrassing secret. At family gatherings I was David's daughter from his first marriage, if I was introduced at all. Most of the time, Patricia simply pretended I didn't exist. As the lobby began to empty, guests filed into the theater. I followed my family at a distance, keeping to the edges as Patricia had requested. She was in her element, air-kissing wealthy wives, name-dropping with practiced ease. Patricia Ashford, a woman in diamonds, greeted her. "Mrs. Whitmore. How wonderful to see you," Patricia practically purred. "You look divine. Have you met my husband, David? He's the contractor who built the Riverside development." Dad shook hands politely while Patricia launched into her usual routine. Subtle bragging disguised as conversation, careful positioning of herself among the elite. "And this must be your daughter," Mrs. Whitmore said, glancing at Madison. "Yes, my Madison. She's at Colia studying art history. Very sophisticated interests." I hung back, invisible as always. This was Patricia's show and I was just background scenery she wished she could remove. "Excuse me, Miss Anderson." I turned to find a man in an impeccable black uniform approaching. He was tall, distinguished, with silver hair and kind eyes, the head usher, judging by the gold cord on his shoulder. "Yes," I said softly, glancing nervously at Patricia, who had stopped mid-sentence to stare. "I'm James Morrison, head of guest services. Your private box is prepared if you'd like to head up before the crowds." The lobby seemed to go silent. Every head turned, including Patricia's. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "There must be some mistake." James smiled warmly. "No mistake, Miss Anderson. Box 5 as always. Would you prefer champagne or wine this evening?" My mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Patricia's face shifted from surprise to suspicion to near panic. "Emma," Dad said slowly, "what's this about a private box?" James looked delighted. "Oh, you're here with guests tonight. Wonderful. The box easily accommodates 8. Shall I arrange refreshments for everyone? I began then stopped. There was no explaining this without revealing everything. The years of secrecy, the choice to let them believe I was barely scraping by. Patricia recovered first. There must be some confusion. Emma works at a small gallery. She certainly doesn't have a private box at Lincoln Center. James' brows lifted. Begging your pardon, ma'am, but Miss Anderson has been a box holder for 3 years. She's one of our most valued patrons. That's impossible. Madison blurted. Em's poor, she can barely afford rent. Nearby guests had stopped to listen. Phones were being discreetly lifted. This was exactly the kind of social drama that would be viral by morning. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, I said quietly. No need for privacy, Patricia said, her voice carrying across the lobby. I'd like to understand how my stepdaughter, who works retail, supposedly has a private box at one of the most exclusive venues in the city. James looked uneasy but professional. Perhaps Ms. Anderson would prefer to explain the arrangement herself. All eyes turned to me. Patricia's burned with fury, Dad's were full of confusion, and Madison's phone was definitely recording. I took a steady breath. There's no arrangement to explain. I own box 5. You own it. Patricia's voice rose to a near shriek. That's impossible. Do you have any idea what those cost? Actually, I did. Box 5 had cost me $2.8 million when I purchased it 3 years ago. One of several investments I'd made after my art gallery took off beyond anything I'd imagined. What began as a small space showcasing local artists had become something much bigger. 3 of the artists I'd discovered early in their careers now sold for 6 figures. The gallery had expanded to 3 locations, and I'd quietly built a small art world empire. But I'd never told my family. Why would I? They'd made it clear my opinions and achievements didn't matter. It was easier to let them think I was struggling than to deal with Patricia's greed. Emma, Dad said softly. Is this true? Box 5 is registered to Anderson Arts Holdings, James confirmed. Ms. Anderson has also been extremely generous to our youth education programs. Anderson Arts Holdings? Patricia repeated faintly. You own a company? Before I could respond, another voice chimed in. Emma Anderson. I thought that was you. A woman in an elegant burgundy gown approached, smiling warmly. Catherine Mills, the New York Times arts critic. Catherine, I greeted with a smile. Lovely to see you. I was hoping I'd run into you tonight, she said brightly. Thank you again for that introduction to Marcus Rivera. His latest series is extraordinary. Exactly the kind of fresh voice the art world needs. He turned to my family, beaming. Are you friends of Emma's? You must be so proud. She has the best eye for talent in the city. Half the major collectors won't make a move without consulting her first. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a stunned goldfish. This is my family, I said calmly. My father David. My stepmother Patricia. And my half-sister Madison. Oh, how wonderful. Catherine smiled graciously. Emma, you never mentioned your family was interested in the arts. Patricia couldn't even answer. They're not, I said simply. The awkwardness of that statement hung in the air. Catherine looked confused while my family stood frozen in shock. Well, Catherine said after a moment, I should let you get to your seats. Enjoy the performance, Emma. I'll look forward to your thoughts afterward. As she walked away, silence stretched uncomfortably. Other guests were still staring, whispering among themselves. Several had their phones out, no doubt documenting this very public family drama. Ms. Anderson, James said gently, shall I escort your party to box 5? I looked at my family. Really looked at them. Dad seemed overwhelmed, struggling to process this new information about his daughter. Madison was still recording, her wide eyes gleaming with the excitement of potential social media content. And Patricia looked like her entire world had just shifted beneath her feet. You own a private box, she said slowly. You own an art company. You know New York Times critics. Yes, I said quietly. But you dress like, she gestured toward my simple black dress, faltering. Like someone who doesn't need to prove her worth through expensive clothes, I finished for her. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was tired. Tired of being treated like an embarrassment. Tired of pretending to be less than I was just to make other people comfortable. Why didn't you tell us? Dad asked. His voice was quiet, pained. I looked at him, really looked. When had he gotten so much gray in his hair? When had those lines around his eyes grown so deep? When would I have told you, Dad? I asked softly. During Sunday dinners, when Patricia explains why I'll never amount to anything. During family gatherings, when Madison posts photos of everyone except me. When exactly would have been a good time to share my success with people who've made it clear they think I'm a failure? That's not fair, Patricia protested, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Isn't it? I asked. Tonight you told me I was too poor and unsophisticated for this theater. You suggested I wait in the car so I wouldn't embarrass you. You literally told me not to tell anyone I'm related to you. The lobby had mostly cleared by now, though a few stragglers still lingered, watching our scene unfold. Security guards positioned themselves discreetly nearby, ready to intervene if things got heated. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in the box, James suggested diplomatically. The performance begins in 10 minutes. I almost said no. I almost told them to enjoy the show while I went home to my quiet apartment and my simple life. But something in Dad's expression stopped me. A sadness that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with regret. Box 5, I said finally. But we need to talk after the show. James looked relieved. Right this way. As we walked through the grand corridors of the theater, Patricia remained uncharacteristically silent. The grandeur of Box 5 seemed to overwhelm her. The plush velvet seats, the perfect view of the stage, the champagne service, even the private restroom and coat closet. Emma, she said finally, once James had departed and left us alone. I owe you an apology. I took my seat, the best one, center position with a perfect view, and looked at her. Do you? I had no idea about your situation, your success, your business. This. She gestured around the box. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. If you'd known I was successful, would you have treated me differently? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. That's what I thought, I said softly. The lights dimmed and the curtain rose, saving us from further conversation. For the next 3 hours we sat in silence, watching one of the most beautiful performances I'd ever seen. The dancers were exquisite, the music sublime, the staging flawless. But I barely absorbed any of it. My mind was too busy processing the night's revelations and what they meant. During intermission, Patricia tried again. Emma, I want you to know that I never meant to make you feel unwelcome. Didn't you? I asked. Because from where I stood, that seemed to be exactly your intention. I thought, she hesitated. I thought you were content with your simple life. That you preferred staying in the background. You thought I was a failure, I said evenly, and it made you feel better about yourself to keep me in that box. Dad winced at my words but didn't contradict them. I want to make this right, Patricia said. How? I don't know, she admitted. Tell me how. I considered her question through the second half of the performance. How do you fix years of dismissal and condescension? How do you rebuild a relationship that was built on judgment and cruelty? When the final curtain fell and the theater erupted in applause, I finally had my answer. You start by seeing me, I said as we gathered our things. Not as an embarrassment to be managed or a problem to be solved. Just as a person with her own life, her own successes, her own value. I can do that, Patricia said quietly. Can you? I asked gently. Because this isn't about money or boxes or business success. It's about basic decency, treating people with respect regardless of what you think they can do for you. We rode down in the private elevator in silence. In the lobby, several people nodded respectfully at me. Other box holders, major donors, people from the art world who knew who I was. Patricia watched each interaction with growing amazement. How long? Dad asked as we waited for our cars. How long what? How long have you been successful? Really successful? About 5 years, I said. The gallery started small but grew faster than I ever expected. And you never told us because? I looked at him. The man who'd raised me, who'd loved me in the only way he knew how, but who'd married a woman who saw me as a threat. Because I learned early that my achievements made Patricia uncomfortable. And making Patricia uncomfortable made you uncomfortable. So I stopped sharing. Dad's face crumpled. Emma, I'm so sorry. I know you are, Dad, I said softly. But sorry doesn't fix the years of feeling like I didn't belong in my own family. What can we do? Madison asked. She'd been surprisingly quiet all evening, and for the first time, I realized she might actually be seeing the family dynamic for what it was. You can start by deleting whatever you recorded tonight, I said. This was embarrassing enough without it becoming social media content. Madison looked down at her phone, then back up. To my surprise, she opened the video and deleted it without argument. Done, she said. And, I'm sorry too. I never thought about how the things we said made you feel. Thank you, I said quietly. My car arrived first. A simple black sedan Patricia probably assumed was an Uber, though it was actually my driver. As I prepared to leave, Patricia reached out and took my arm. Will you give us another chance? She asked. A real one. I studied her face, searching for signs of the manipulation I'd grown used to. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. Maybe, I said. But it starts with Sunday dinner next week. You treat me like a member of the family, not a charity case you're tolerating. And Patricia, next time you want to tell someone they don't belong somewhere, remember tonight. As my car pulled away from Lincoln Center, I found myself smiling for the first time all evening. Tomorrow the art world would still know me as a successful gallery owner and talent scout. But my family, my real family, would have to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the woman I'd actually become. And maybe, just maybe, Sunday dinners would finally be something to look forward to instead of endure. The theater had taught them a lesson about assumptions. Now it was up to them to decide what they'd learned.